Hello, and welcome to Picture This, a podcast from the photo archives of the Albuquerque Museum. My name is Jill Hartke, and I'm the digital archivist here at the museum. Today we follow a local sculptor as he builds an architectural wonder on the outskirts of Roswell, New Mexico. In the photo archives of the Albuquerque Museum is a photograph of a construction site with sculpted dirt surrounding a cement building. This building is called the Henge, and it was the creative brainchild of Albuquerque artist Herb Goldman. Here's the story behind the photograph. About 5 miles outside the heart of Roswell, New Mexico, was 7 acres of land, once owned by Roswell oil man Donald B. Anderson. Anderson bought the land in the 1940s, but it wasn't until the 1960s that he met artist Herbert Goldman, who was teaching at the University of New Mexico in Albuquerque. Anderson and Goldman started discussing a recent world cruise the Anderson family had made, and specifically the ancient ruins Anderson had visited in places like Iran and Afghanistan. Anderson wanted something like that on his land in Roswell. He commissioned Herb Goldman to create it. Goldman didn't want to make a replica of any specific ancient ruin, but he found inspiration in many of the places Anderson mentioned. Goldman set to work creating a clay model of the Henge. When he showed the model to Anderson, it was approved, with the stipulation that Goldman flip it around so that Anderson could look out his bedroom window and see it every day. This was the only direction that Goldman received from Anderson, who believed in giving artists plenty of room to create. He also gave Herb Goldman an unlimited budget and invited him to move into the Anderson home for the time that it would take to build the Henge. In 1963, Herb Goldman began building the entire piece on site. He'd done large sculptures before, but this was bigger than anything he'd ever attempted. He enlisted the help of Jim Allen Innes, a structural engineer from Albuquerque. The two worked together to create the construction documents and specifications for the Henge from that clay model that Goldman had created. When Donald Anderson instructed them to flip the building, Innes and Goldman didn't want to redo the construction documents, so they just turned Innes's drawing upside down and set to work. The steel pipe structural frame of the Henge was built beside a barn near Anderson's oil field before it was loaded onto a flatbed and driven to the site. A crane then lifted that prefabricated steel frame into place. After that, the frame was sprayed with gunite, a type of concrete. Herb Goldman then came along with a trowel, and he smoothed the surface of the entire sculpture. It was massive. The Henge measures 150 feet by 150 feet, and it stands 3 stories tall. At one point, the stress of getting the structure in place safely was so nerve-wracking that one crane operator gladly handed the controls over to Donald Anderson. It took Goldman about 8 months to finish the Henge, and he spent about $75,000 to build it. It was completely unlike anything in New Mexico, a modern sculpture of monumental proportions that you could live in if you wanted. The interior included a throne room and a mural room. There was an overlook near the top and skylights which helped to light the interior spiral staircase and catwalk. Anderson's art collection quickly began to fill the interior walls, and he would later commission a mural to be painted. Originally, the land was flat, but Donald Anderson got behind the wheel of his tractor and began pushing earth over the foundation and molding it into a hill. He also created berms around the sculpture that allowed a person to look at the Henge from different heights. They covered the dirt with grass, making the building look like it was perched on a landscape of rolling hills, rather than set in the flat oil fields of the Western Plains. By 1964, the whole adventure was complete. Herb Goldman's creation of the Henge helped to develop his reputation as a large-scale sculptor, and it led to many more commissions throughout the United States, and even a large swimming pool in the Ivory Coast in Africa. Donald Anderson hired him several more times in the 1960s to create sculptures for a shopping center in Roswell. Anderson's role in the arts grew as well. Not only did he continue to commission work from Goldman and others, but his experience with Herb Goldman and the Hinge inspired Donald Anderson to create the Roswell Artist in Residence program in 1967. That program allows artists to spend a year creating artwork while living in Roswell. Anderson also opened a museum of contemporary art in Roswell in the 1990s to showcase that work created through the residency program. So what began as a conversation about Donald Anderson's vacation in 1962 wound up creating not only Herb Goldman's Hinge, but a much larger and far-reaching investment in the arts in New Mexico. Anderson himself loved to paint. Through his Artist in Residence program, he was able to share his love of art with artists from around the world, and hundreds of artists have been gifted with space and time to freely create. His relationship with Herb Goldman inspired the residency, and Goldman is considered the first of the artists in residence in Roswell. Not only did the Hinge gain international acclaim and help both men advance in their creative pursuits, but their successful partnership helped to earn the Hinge a spot on the National Register of Historic Places in 2019. Herb Goldman passed away in 2012 at the age of 90, and Donald Anderson passed away in 2020 at the age of 101. The photographs documenting the building of the monumental and innovative sculpture were donated to the Albuquerque Museum Photo Archives by Herb Goldman's daughter, Lisa. Thank you for joining us for Picture This with the Albuquerque Museum. Please join us next time as we look at the story behind another photograph in the museum's collection.